morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Professor Bandalaria, and to my classmates from wherever you are in the world. I'm Carla, and I will be reporting the topic that was assigned to me under our first module, which is what are social problems. This is part of learning all about social change, which was introduced extensively in the previous report by my groupmate staff. Before we dive in, I assume a lot of us already have a working definition of social problems. In fact, we can instantly list some that are being experienced around the globe, including poverty, hunger, racial inequality, gender inequality, alcohol and drug abuse, crime and criminal justice, lack of education, terrorism, and so on and so forth. But in this module, we will learn that there are components that actually identify a social problem. In our reading, it says that it is any condition or behavior that has negative consequences for large numbers of people and that is generally recognized as a condition or behavior that needs to be addressed. This definition has both an objective and a subjective component, and we'll get to that now. For the objective component, it has to have negative consequences for a large number of people for it to be defined as a social problem. It also needs empirical evidence, meaning it has to be backed up by data, studies, and reliable resources, etc. I have I have here an example. Here in the Philippines, housing is of course a social problem. We see it everywhere. Lots of informal settlers living under the rails. We see homeless families outside begging for food, asking for alms. So housing remains inaccessible for millions of Filipinos because they simply cannot afford it, especially low income and large families, as well as those who live in highly urbanized cities. And this is according to a study released by the Philippine Institute for Development Studies. So this meets the objective component of social problems because number one, it says here that millions of Filipinos are affected. So that covers the large numbers of people. And number two, it has empirical evidence from the study of the ideas, which is also a reliable source of information. Moving on to subjective, here we ask, how do we know if a social problem has negative consequences? Here we recognize society's differing beliefs and point of views in life. So that is why we have multiple sectors. We have religious sectors, the youth sector, the labor sector. It's a back and forth process between individuals interacting within our social world. So there must be a perception that a certain concern or issue needs to be addressed for it to be a social problem. So, in simple terms, this is a problem that is socially defined. And I have another example here. We've recently encountered in the news that there are numerous religious organizations rallying against the passing of the Sojibil in Congress. Despite advocates pushing for this for 36 years and counting, there are still members of our society that don't deem it as a social problem that needs action even though LGBTs are found in every sector of the Philippine society. And yet, despite the attention it gets from legal policymakers, the fight against discrimination remains to be treated as more of a sectoral issue than a social problem. This leads us to the question, when is a social problem a social problem? Let's tackle Rubin Don and Weinberg's social constructionist view, which we've read in our module. Here, many types of negative conditions and behaviors exist. Many of these are considered sufficiently negative to acquire the status of a social problem. However, some do not. You can think of others that even use social problems or fear mongering of social problems for a political agenda. We can take, for example, the Oplan Tokhang of the Duterte administration. Every Filipino became scared and fearful for their lives when this opulence came about, and we actually watched drug addicts, drug lords, or even innocent people roaming the streets, shot dead or persecuted on our TV screens, and it's all over the news. So drugs became like the number one priority social problem in our country. It was the alarming number that was revealed to us then, how the drug abuse rates are accelerating and we are unsafe. So collectively as a society we saw the threat and policymakers, or our president for that matter, presented a solution of eliminating them from the society so that this problem will no longer be a social problem. Many did agree, though, with this and rallied behind the administration's plan. So it was a social problem that's socially defined. All right, next, I'm going to touch on the sociological perspectives on social problems. Here we discover that sociological understanding of social problems that rests heavily on the concept of the sociological imagination. All three here are very self explanatory, and because we have limited time, I won't elaborate as much on them anymore. We have functionalism, which of course emphasizes the functions that social institutions serve to ensure the ongoing stability of our society. Simply put, it's the importance of social institutions such as the family, religion, and education for producing a stable society free of, or at least have little social problems. Next is the conflict theory, which focuses on racial, ethnic, social class conflicts and um, how we how the importance of social institutions how our institutions actually contribute back to inequality, while the functionalist theory emphasizes the benefits of the various parts of society for ongoing social stability. Conflict theory favors social change to reduce inequality. We can cite here, of course, political dynasties, abuse of power, and then lastly, we have symbolic interactionism, which highlights how individuals interpret the meanings of their situations. Here, people do not merely learn the roles that society has set out for them. Instead, they construct these roles as they interact with one another. Next, we have continuity in change. While social problems are persistent, change is still possible. And as the saying goes, it's the only constant in this world. Although social problems are indeed persistent, it is also true that certain problems are less serious now than in the past. Another example is the Philippine minimum wage. According to Dole, our minimum wage today has increased to 570 pesos from 537 pesos in 2021. Although little, this already means a lot for a majority of urban Filipino families struggling to make ends meet. We can also see here that we've come far from the lowest 89 pesos in 1989, of course, because of how our economy has changed throughout the decades and have progressed. But aside from that, aside from our policymakers that made this happen, this was made possible as a lot of labor groups have rallied and called for this for years, which brings us to the next slide. So the actions of individuals and groups may also make a difference. Many people have public service jobs or volunteer in all sorts of activities involving a social problem. Do you guys remember the community pantries back in the height of the pandemic? The community pantry movement in the Philippines first sparked on April in 2021 when a small bamboo cart containing groceries appeared in Maginhawa, QC. And the cart came with a simple cardboard sign that said, "Magbigay ayon sa kakayahan, kumuha batay sa pangangailangan." So give what you can and take what you need. Many people have associated this movement with the Filipino values of bayanihan, a spirit of communal unity to achieve something. However, this movement is also a response to the Duterte government's inadequate pandemic response. So a long-term lockdown in the Philippines forced many of its citizens out of work, therefore increasing unemployment. So it became a social problem without a doubt. The government promised low financial aid, but it got stuck due to logistics, with only a fraction of it completed. So, in short, people were left to fend for themselves and help one another in ways that they only can. Next. While I was researching for other materials to use for my report, I have come across this podcast called The Social Breakdown by sociology professors in Hawaii. Majority of the content effectively discussed our topic, and it also included the objective and subjective realities of social problems. So I encourage you guys to listen to it. I know it's 36 minutes long, but I promise it would really provide um, a wider outlook on social problems and how it manifests in our everyday micro life. They mentioned here relevant problems such as COVID-19, unemployment, crime, racism, and a lot more. The link is here. And at the end of this report, I will properly list down my references, which you'll also find in the discussion forum for easier access. So before I end my report, I'd like to leave this simple quote, which I found very insightful from one of our readings. It's in the forward of Communication for Social Change, the working paper series. So we as development communication practitioners or aspiring ones are to move mountains for social change. These mountains are existing and upcoming social problems. So through communication for social change, they move mountains of apathy, mountains of hopelessness, mountains of cynicism, and even mountains of public inefficiency, waste, and corruption. For my discussion questions here, first, what do you think are social problems Filipinos face today that need more attention from policymakers? And secondly, have you participated in any volunteer or other activity involving a social problem? If so, why did you do so? And if not, why have you not participated in such an effort? So I look forward to your responses, guys. So that's a wrap. Here are my references. These are all clickable. You can view them separately at your own time. So thank you for watching. And I hope you learned a thing or two. I'm Carla again, and I'll see you around this semester. Thank you.